Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Mixed Feelings. At a time of deep division and distrust, this is a time to reaffirm our devotion to being an inclusive institution representing the entirety of the community. We have the power to impact lives positively, reminding our community that despite the pressures around us, art remains a space of inclusion, resilience, and connection. Thank you for your continued belief in the power of our museum to foster a better and more connected world. Every community in the United States owes its existence and vitality to people from around the world. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn here in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations that can be counted. Recognition of the many layers of our history is critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and differences. Palm Springs Art Museum respectfully acknowledges the ancestral homelands of the Agua Caliente Band of Cahuilla Indians and the other sovereign Indian nations of Southern California. We recognize their ongoing cultural and spiritual connections to this land, past, present, and future. Thank you for joining us, and now a message from Adam Lerner.
Hi, I'm Adam Lerner, the Joanne McGrath, Executive Director and CEO of Palm Springs Art Museum, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the Season 3 premiere of Mixed Feelings. I created the mixed feeling concept back in 2004, and over the years we have had some pretty crazy programs. Programs like T.S. Eliot and Fresh Meat Sausage, or Andy Warhol and Artificial Lighting, Bigfoot and Carl Jung. We've had some really amazing connections being made between some very different seeming topics, but we have never, never, paired a science topic with an artist speaking about their own work. And yet we are doing that this year, a very special science and art edition of Mixed Feelings, to be able to partner with our Getty Pacific Standard Time exhibition, Particles and Waves. We are trying something we've never done before, all for your enjoyment. So I hope you enjoy tonight's program, and now I'm going to turn it over to Sharissa Iqbal, our Associate Curator.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Adam, virtually. I'm Sharissa Iqbal. I'm the Associate Curator for Modern and Contemporary Art here at Palm Springs Art Museum, and I am a co-curator of the exhibition Particles and Waves, Southern California Abstraction and Science, 1945 to 1990. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is our catalog available in the bookstore, and it's been really exciting to get to bring together the worlds of art and science through this exhibition, and now we get to see it happen in front of our eyes with speakers tonight and throughout this season of Mixed Feelings. So thank you for being here this evening, and welcome to Mixed Feelings, back-to-back lectures on unrelated topics that are somehow connected. The rules of Mixed Feelings are simple. A lot of you may know them from previous seasons, but one speaker talks on a subject for 20 minutes, a second speaker talks on a completely unrelated subject for 20 minutes, and then we have a Q&A period of both at the same time, yeah. During the first two talks, the speakers are strictly forbidden from making connections between the topics, but during the Q&A, anything can happen. This year, we have a special edition of Mixed Feelings, as Adam mentioned, where we will explore how science has created opportunities for abstraction in art by pairing a contemporary artist and scientist in back-to-back 20-minute lectures. Today's Mixed Feelings topics are conservation science and the art of Gisela Colón. And before we continue, I'd like to introduce you to two familiar faces that you'll see throughout this season of Mixed Feelings. Our Mixed Feelings 2025 DJ, DJ C. Love, and our MC, Stevie Crooks. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mark Leonard. Mark Leonard trained as an artist until deciding to pursue a career as a paintings restorer. As an undergraduate at Oberlin College, he followed a multidisciplinary degree in studio art, art history, and chemistry. This led to graduate degrees in art history and conservation from the Institute of Fine Arts of New York, University. He worked at the Metropolitan Museum of Art for 5 years and then moved to Los Angeles, where he spent 26 years as the paintings restorer at the J. Paul Getty Museum and headed that department from 1998 to 2010. Yeah, let's hear it for Mark Leonard. In 2010, he returned to working full-time as an independent artist. In 2012, he was invited to join the staff of the Dallas Museum of Art as chief conservator. After helping to build the museum's conservation department and serving subsequently as the interim associate director for curatorial affairs, he returned to creating his own work in Palm Springs in 2017. As a restorer, he has worked on a number of important pictures from an international array of institutions, including the Frick Collection, the Kröller-Müller Museum in the Netherlands, the Huntington Art Collections, the Yale University Art Gallery, the Wallace Collection in London, and the Gemalde Gallery in Berlin, to name just a few. So let's welcome to the stage Mark Leonard.
Thank you, Charissa, and thank you as well for all of you coming tonight. I'm a very visual person, so while I ramble on with a few introductory remarks, I have Van Gogh's irises, painted in 1888, just the year before he died, currently in the collection of the Getty Museum, and we'll get back to a scientific study of this in just a minute. But a couple of disclaimers. For those of you who thought you were going to hear about climate change, it's not that kind of conservation. It's art conservation, which is the technical study of works of art, the restoration of works of art, and the preservation of works of art. And the second disclaimer is I'm not really a scientist. I'm sort of like a soap opera actor who portrays a doctor and is forced to say, well, I'm not really a doctor, I just play one on TV. So I'm not really a scientist, I just pretend to be one when I'm in an art museum. The reason for that is that back in the 1970s, when I was training to become a paintings restorer, there were very few scientists working in the field. And as a restorer, we had to learn all of the scientific techniques for doing analytical work ourselves. I had to learn how to take cross-sections, take x-rays, work with infrared cameras, and do all of that stuff that fortunately now a dedicated group of very talented and very sophisticated scientists does for us. So I'm sort of their spokesperson this evening and when we look at the scientific examination of works of art. So let's get back to Van Gogh. Van Gogh was in the asylum in Saint-Rémy. The interior courtyard of the asylum in Saint-Rémy had a beautiful iris garden, and he made many paintings of those irises. The Getty acquired this picture when I was still working there, and it's in virtually perfect condition, something that we never really thought very much about. But a scientist at the Getty during the past couple of years was beginning to have some concerns about the color of the flowers themselves, because irises aren't usually blue, they're usually purple. And if we take a close look at the lower right-hand corner, what you see is the very thin white ground, and then these blue irises, these blue petals mixed with some white paint, but they're stridently blue. They're not the sort of deep violet purple color that we normally associate with irises. So the scientist thought, well, let's take a cross-section. And what she did was to take a pinpoint, smaller than a pinpoint section of paint from one of the iris petals, turn it on its side, mount it in a piece of plastic, and put it under a microscope. And what she saw was the very thin white ground underneath the paint, and moving upwards, this kind of violet-colored paint, some of the white highlights, and then a top layer of paint, which starts out violet where it was protected from the light, but at the top edge where it was exposed to light and to oxygen, it's faded to a blue color. And what we also know now is that this purple color was a very popular pigment in the late 19th century called geranium lake. And you think of the color of purple geraniums, and that's why it was called Geranium Lake. And in this particular case, Van Gogh favored it and used it for his irises, and it's all turned blue because of the fading of the geranium lake. And We can even map the entire surface of the picture. This is a technique called X-ray fluorescence, and a machine goes back and forth over the entire surface of the painting, shoots a little beam of X-rays at the surface, and the different elements in the different pigments emit fluorescences, which then are read by the machine itself. And as a result, you can make a map of the entire surface. And if you look for geranium lake, everywhere that you see purple here is where the geranium lake pigment exists and where it's faded on the surface. So what we see as blue irises was really very different when Van Gogh had it sitting on his easel. But we also live in an age of digital recreations, and what we were able to do, or what the Getty was able to do, was to make an image of how this picture might have looked when Van Gogh completed it. Very different kind of composition. And there's fading of other colors as well. There's a chrome yellow, which he used for his sunflowers in the background, which also fades, and a different kind of matter, a different kind of lake pigment in the foreground, which was at one point a bright red. So it tells us a lot about the picture. There's absolutely nothing we can do about it. The change has happened, but it deepens our understanding of what we're looking at when we come across the painting in the galleries. So where does this kind of work happen? This is the Getty Conservation Institute, which is a building full of scientists and full of laboratories, people looking at microscopes and taking cross-sections, oftentimes analyzing white paintings in white laboratories. But it's very serious and very sophisticated work, and the scientists work hand in hand with the people who are actually doing the restoration, as well as the curatorial teams that are overseeing the presentation of the works of art in the galleries. And there are many, many techniques that are used. Most of them are based on light. And what you're seeing at the top here is a sort of dissection of the broad range of waves that occur in light. Our human eyes can only see visible light in the middle of the spectrum. And we use that as an important tool in looking at pictures. But on the one hand, we look at the light emitted in the infrared range, which we cannot see, but infrared cameras can see. We look at ultraviolet light by shining ultraviolet lights on the surfaces of the painting, and then X-rays, which we will take a look at in more detail right now. This is Joshua Reynolds' portrait of Sarah Siddons as the Tragic Muse. It's in the collection of the Huntington Art Museum, painted by Reynolds in 1784. Sarah Siddons was the most famous stage actress of her day, and Reynolds painted her portrait not only to compliment her, but to improve his own level of fame and notoriety. And so these sort of two forces, the greatest actress of her day and one of the greatest painters of his day, combined to make this picture. I worked on the painting a couple of years ago, well, really 20 years ago now, when we had at the Getty a copy. This is the original, and then there's a copy which Reynolds' studio had produced a few years after the completion of the painting, and we did an extensive study of the two pictures. But we're only going to look at the Huntington version tonight. So this is the painting. The first thing we did was to take an X-ray, and a few surprises showed up. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a figure of terror standing in the background, which is typical for a dramatic subject. But it looks, in the X-ray, we see a figure of melancholy, a figure with the head sort of resting on his hand. And for some reason, Reynolds decided that that wasn't an appropriate gesture to have there. It may have been the fact that this raised arm was conflicting with the raised arm of Sarah Siddons, and it was just too much of a simultaneous juxtaposition. But more interesting was in the lower left-hand corner, in this area right here, there had been a little Puto figure with a scroll, which really looks like a script. So Puto presenting the actress with the next play that she was about to participate in. And the X-rays help explain a drawing that was done by the artist John Flaxman, who visited Reynolds' studio. And we had never understood why this drawing, which was a record of Flaxman's, after Flaxman had been to the studio, he went back to his own studio and he made some notes about the painting that he had seen that Reynolds was working on. And it was Sarah Siddons as the Tragic Muse, with a figure of melancholy in the upper right-hand corner and a little Puto with a scroll in the lower left-hand corner, and even drew the Puto's legs in there. He misremembered it because he put the arm of the figure of melancholy in the wrong position, but we can forgive him because he wasn't standing in front of the real painting at that point. But he got the Puto right, and we finally understand what we're looking at in this particular drawing, which had never really been understood before. Another discovery that we made was that this monochromatic color scheme, which is really whites and browns and dark mud-colored pigments, was probably not the original plan either. And I took a cross-section from the center of this brown shawl sitting on her lap. And what we see, again, in a kind of geological strata, is the white ground, and then a layer of blue, suggesting that there was a lot of blue drapery there first, then a thin layer of varnish, and then the brown drapery that we see right there, and then a very thick layer of varnish on top. And so originally, Reynolds was planning to have not only the Puto and the figure of melancholy, but Sarah Siddons would have been wearing a blue dress. And that makes sense because of another picture that Reynolds did. This is David Garrick, the producer who produced most of Sarah Siddons' plays, standing between the figures of comedy on the left and tragedy on the right. And tragedy is normally presented in a blue costume. So that all makes sense as well. Again, there's nothing we can do about it. We're not going to take off the top layer of paint, but it adds a dimension and an understanding to the work that we're looking at. And now for something completely different. This is a very beautiful, very small, only about 15, 16 inches high, still life by Edouard Manet, painted in 1882, the year before he died. He did a number of these late still lifes in his final years. Very beautiful picture. You see it in normal light on the left, and on the right you see it in reflected light. And what's slightly disturbing about it is there's a line that runs across the top of the painting, and that was unexplained. We didn't really understand why that fold or that crease was there. So we took an X-ray, or actually a colleague of mine at the Getty took an X-ray to try and understand what was going on there. And after the X-ray was taken, if you look closely at this particular spot, what you see is some canvas here, a big gap, and then some more canvas that looks to be very similar to the canvas that's below. And holding the two together in this gap is a kind of gauze-like fabric. And what you don't see in the X-ray, but you do see with the naked eye, is that behind that layer of gauze is another continuous layer of fabric that is holding these two pieces of canvas together. So the question is, what happened? Did somebody damage the picture? Was it folded over? What's the explanation for this strip at the top? Well, a bit of clever sleuthing came up with the answer. If we take that top strip away and just look at what's left here, this is what we have with the top strip gone. And then if we take that top strip, take it off, turn it upside down, and stick it here, it fits. You can see that the tablecloth that was in that area is completely consistent. So what this suggests is that Manet was unhappy with the composition. He took the picture back to his canvas fabricator. Artists didn't make their own canvases at this point in the late 19th century. They had a fabricator who took care of everything. And he asked the fabricator to cut off the bottom of the canvas. Canvas was very expensive, so don't throw it away, but save it and stick it up on the top so that I can extend the composition and make the top higher and the bottom lower to make the whole thing work together a little bit better. And that's what we see in the X-ray. But then that theory needed a little more confirmation. And so the X-ray was sent to a scientist at Rice University in Houston who's invented a technique for doing thread counting. When canvas is woven, there are very subtle differences in the distance between the warp and the weft threads. And a computer can pick up those subtle differences. And if we look at the layer that's been, the piece of fabric that's been turned upside down, which is here, and we look at the fingerprint of the warp and weft threads, which is translated into color, you see that on this side of the canvas, it's completely consistent. This nice orange line goes right down there. So it tells us that these really were this was an original single piece of canvas. The blue lines go right through. Everything matches up very nicely. And that solves the mystery of what happened to this picture. We also know that it's original because the black paint that goes over onto the top is consistent, and these little hydrangea flowers that they're either hydrangeas or lilacs that go up over the split explains why Manet wanted to extend the top of the picture and make less of a table in the lower portion. Another technique we're going to look at, this is a Defendente Ferrare, a Renaissance painter around 1520 working in Italy, and a very large altarpiece that's in the collection of the Getty Museum right now, and was a great subject for looking at with infrared reflectography. Infrared reflectography involves taking a camera, outfitting it with an infrared sensitive tube that can pick up infrared reflected light that our eyes can't see. And what it often reveals, in this particular case, a detail of the upper left-hand corner, we can see the underdrawing. And you see these archways in the back of the church, and the original drawing shows that the archways were a little bit lower. And you can see the beautiful details of the turban, all of the brickwork in this construction on the right-hand side. The artist really planned out the entire composition in great detail with pen and ink before filling it in with the paint. So it's a glimpse at the artist's evolution of the work of art, and again, deepening our understanding of how the work was created. Scientific work does help restoration. This is the way the restoration studio at the Getty Museum looks, and these are a few of the pictures that I worked on a number of years ago. And I thought we might take a look at how the actual restoration is also making use of the scientific basis. In this case, scientific development of materials that are appropriate for use in the restoration of works of art. This is a beautiful picture by Peter Klaas, Dutch 17th century still life painter, probably painted around 1620 or so, oil on an oak panel. These sorts of still lifes are really about the fleeting character of life, because despite the fact that we have this abundance of riches, we also know that it's temporary. The wine glass has fallen over and spilled onto the oysters. The mince pie is partially eaten. Some of the grapes are beginning to wrinkle and age. So it's a reminder of the vanitas, the temporary nature of beauty in life. I cleaned the picture came to my easel, and I cleaned it, took off a discolored varnish. This is what was revealed. A lot of loss, looks very frightening, but in fact this picture is in very good condition for a Dutch 17th century still life. The biggest problem were these splits in the wood support. The picture was painted on 3 separate oak planks that had been joined together, and the joins did not hold very well over time. And that was exacerbated by a 19th century treatment where someone glued this patchwork of crossbars onto the back. It was called cradling, and it was intended to try and hold the panels together and sort of force them like a straitjacket into behaving. All it really did was make it even worse and make the panels want to try and split apart even more than they did. And the only way to rectify that is to take the whole thing apart. So you take the panels apart, which is a somewhat frightening procedure, and to see a $1 million picture in pieces is also a little unsettling for the collector who owned it. But to make a long story short, you put it all back together. This is the reverse with the splits rejoined and some new wood added to the edges to replace missing parts. And then all of the losses on the surface are filled with a gesso putty to bring the level of those losses back up to the original surface of the remaining oil paint. And the task at this stage is then to fill all of these losses, all of this sort of static noise in so that it disappears to the naked eye. You have to be careful about the materials that you choose for this kind of work, because the original is painted in oil. You can't add more oil paint to it because that would eventually become irreversible. You'd never be able to get the restorations off of the surface and get back to what remained of the original paint. So working with the team of scientists at the National Gallery a number of years ago, we came up with a restoration material that works very nicely, and it's a 2-step process. The underpainting is first done with gouache, a water-based paint, so that you'll always be able to remove it in the future with just a little bit of water and it won't interfere with any removal of the original oil paint. These are gouache paints, kind of like we had as kids in kindergarten, where you finger paint with water-based paints. And then a series of synthetic resins are brushed on top of that to provide saturation and varnish and deep gloss. And then restoration paints that are designed to mimic the look of aged oil paints, but are made with synthetic resins that are soluble in incredibly mild solvents, so that once again, at some point in the future, hopefully 200 or 300 years from now, when the work that I did on the picture has aged in one direction and the picture itself has aged in another direction and they no longer match, my work can be removed and replaced without harming or changing or doing any damage to what remains of the original. So to go back to the original painting, it was a matter of about 6 or 7 months of putting it all back together, really knitting together the losses. The hardest part were the grapes, because I had to learn how Klaus had painted grapes, which was a pretty tricky thing to do. But once all of that is done, the picture is reunified. And so the losses don't matter anymore. All that matters is what remains of the original, which remains visible to you when you see the picture in the galleries today. So that's about as far as I'm going to go with scientific technique. Adam had told me that I could talk a little bit about my own work, and this will help perhaps stimulate some of the mixed feelings conversation that we have after you've heard Gisela give her presentation about her work. But I mentioned that I learned how to paint grapes, and I thought, well, let me see what I can do with that myself. So I started out doing a series of what I called still life pictures, using the grapes and that I had learned how to paint in Peter Klaus's work for my own work, and that led to more sort of geometric abstraction of that whole theme, and I did a number of pictures that worked on that still life conception, and eventually they wind up at the gallery that represents me in Los Angeles. And so here's my little group of still life pictures next to a Doug Olson and a Carl Benjamin, artists that actually Charissa knows well because of her work in the Particles and Waves exhibition. My time is up, so I'll turn it over to Lala.
Thank you so much, Mark. And now I get to turn it over to Lala Johnson, the Public Programming and Special Events Coordinator at the museum. Here's Lala.
Hello, everyone. Oh, wow, three claps. What did I do to you all? I thought you guys loved me a little bit more. That's okay. I'll save it for after, and I'll harass all of you for not clapping. So we do a nice, fun intermission for all the first-timers for Mixed Feelings. How many of you have been to Mixed Feelings before by a show of hands? Okay, good amount. And for the rest of you that haven't been, raise your hands. Okay, so what we like to do during intermission is play a game called Never Have I Ever. Some of you may have played it in your collegiate years. Some of you may still play it. So the rules to the game are very simple. I'm going to have everyone stand on their feet for me, please. Thank you. All right, we got a good crowd here. So the rules are simple. If you've done it, then you sit. If you haven't, then you remain standing. The last people standing will battle it off with the final question, and then you get to win a very cool gift from yours only, the one that you didn't clap for. Okay, so is everyone ready? All right, so never have I ever eaten someone else's lunch from the break room. If you've done it, sit. If you haven't, remain standing. Oh, wow. Take out. Shame on you. Never have I ever gone skiing. Okay, more people need to take trips to Utah or Big Bear. Got it. Never have I ever peed in a pool. I lost a lot of you here. We have no beach. We've all been to the Ace Hotel. Sit. Sit, please. You've been to the Saguaro, you in the back. I see you. Never have I ever faked sick from work. I lost a lot of you. Hangovers included, yes. Never have I ever overdrafted my bank account. Wow, the guy in the back owes me money though, so I'm kind of worried about him. Never have I ever been arrested. Okay, all right, we have a couple standing. Okay, we have two. So, for the final question, let's see if you can both get it. Whoever gets it, you have to come up here and grab your prize, okay? So, for our next speaker, Gisela Colón is going to come up here and speak. Do you know what her enigmatic mountainous structures resemble? What type of ammunition do they resemble? Have you seen her artwork? Are you familiar? Oh, we do, 3rd floor. Do you know what her artwork has a tendency to resemble? And it's a form of ammunition. I'll give you a hint. Yes. Yep, bullets. Come and get your gift. Everybody give a round of applause to our winner. And let me grab our wonderful gift. I like to keep our gifts in a Nicolas Cage pillow because it makes it more serious. Thank you. Me or Nicholas? Say me. Okay. All right, come and open it. I'm going to unzip it for you. And then you're going to show everybody what you got.
Cool.
Go ahead and pull them out. There's 2 in there.
Sweet.
Beautiful rings.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. Okay, everybody.
Okay, open the box.
Oh,
Oh,
very cool. Voila.
it's a giant bullet. And then you have one more gift in there. What's in there?
This is so fun. Who would have thought?
It's Mixed Feelings.
Aha.
She has 2
Shot glasses.
shot glasses that are made out of 50 caliber bullets, by the way.
I am ready to go.
Yeah, you're ready to go.
Don't mess with me.
It's a 2-for-1 party. What's your name?
Susie.
Thank you for coming, Susie.
Thank you. That was fun.
All right. I pass it back to Charissa, and when I see you guys next week, if I don't see you clap, it's on and it's on. Back to you, Charissa.
Thank you, Lala, and congratulations to our winner. I'm really pleased to introduce Gisela Colón, a Puerto Rican artist, a contemporary artist whose ecofeminist works address ecological and universal concerns. Employing decolonial strategies, Colón reconfigures entangled histories into a universal language, transmuting forms of violence, displacement, and death into vessels of healing, light, and life. Drawing from her formative years in Puerto Rico, Colón pioneered a language of organic minimalism, employing as source material her experiences with armed violence, ancestral biological memories, and universal forces of nature. Colón's process of layering and stacking 21st century materials such as optical acrylics, carbon fiber, and matter harvested from the geographical sites of her life narrates her complex history as a diasporic Puerto Rican artist. Colón has exhibited internationally throughout the United States, Europe, Egypt, the Middle East, and Latin America, including several UNESCO World Heritage Sites such as the Pyramids of Giza in Egypt, the Citadel in Cairo, the Alula Desert in Saudi Arabia, and the monumental axis of Brasilia in Brazil. Next week, she will unveil a Caribbean heritage project at the Havana Biennial in Cuba, and in 2025, she opens a solo presentation at the Museo del Arte de Puerto Rico in Puerto Rico. So thank you so much. Here's Gisela.
Bendiciones pa' todo el mundo, ey. Chavos pa' todo el mundo, en el club botella pa' todo el mundo, ey. Hasta pa' los que se viraron
Y me tiraron. Bad Bunny. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Let me get this up and running. Okay, here we go. So, thank you for having me. Adam Lerner, Christine Vondradi, Charissa Iqbal, Lala Johnson, Luisa Heredia. Thank you for having me. It's really special to be here. And I titled my presentation From the Personal to the Universal because that's kind of what I do when I make my art. I draw from my own personal experiences and I transform them into something that people can resonate with, on a more universal basis. And this is where it all started. 1970, this is 1970, I'm probably 4 years old, and I'm in Puerto Rico, and I was surrounded by all kinds of, animals, plants. I grew up in the natural world there, and these are the kind of things that gave me strength as a child. And my rooster, I loved my rooster, and for some reason I wasn't scared. Most kids, they say, oh, the rooster's gonna peck your eyes out, and for me, he was just like this wonderful little animal with beautiful feathers that glistened all kinds of colors. And my mother was a painter, and from a very early age, I learned how to paint oil on canvas and wood. And we would drive out into the countryside in Puerto Rico, observe the natural world, and we would come back home and paint it. And here I am sitting above a sugarcane painting titled Zafra, depicting the process of harvesting the sugarcane. And you can see the thick layers of impasto oil paint that we used to layer on top of layer with knives. And, oops, sorry, went the wrong way. Here's a painting from 1977 when I was 11 years old, titled La Finca, which is the farm, depicting El Campo, which is the rural area of the farm in Bayamón where I grew up. And at a very young age, I connected the act of creating art with nature and the earth. And my youth was also steeped in magical realism. My grandmother practiced white magic. She was clairvoyant. She predicted the death of her son. And I remember one night, 2 in the morning, going to the bathroom, and she'd be in her rocking chair and crying. I'd say, Ñaña, ¿por qué lloras? Why are you crying? Oh my God, I saw that Kiko got killed and he's dead. And that actually came to pass years later. So I learned from my grandmother this sense of the invisible, that, connecting to these invisible forces of nature. And I also, through my mother, we would study all kinds of books on art, Picasso, Monet, and this is Wilfredo Lam, which was a Cuban artist that we also studied. And this painting is a very famous painting called The Jungle in the collection of MoMA. And it depicts the sense of the Caribbean. So I put it there so you guys could get an idea of what it feels like to grow up in the Caribbean. And I read lots of Latin American literature, epic sagas of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Isabel Allende, the poetry of Jorge Luis Borges. And in the end, it's just a concoction of magical realism that still infuses my practice today. And I grew up fascinated by astronomy, and my father was a scientist, and he would take me to the Observatorio de Arecibo, which was the largest telescope in the world until 2016. And I became fascinated with outer space, celestial bodies, the moon, and the wonders of the cosmic world. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was in 5th grade. And my father was a complicated man. He was a brilliant scientist, a chemist that worked for the government of Puerto Rico. And in the 1970s, he discovered that the dust from Sahara Africa arrived in Puerto Rico. So from a very early age, I learned this sense of that the earth is an interconnected ecosystem. But he was also, a violent person and often carried a gun. And I was surrounded by gun violence as a child. I had experienced it both on a personal level. I lost my mother at the age of 12, and also collectively, we lived through militarized colonialism on the island, starting with the history of Puerto Rico as a colony of Spain, and then when the United States operations in Vieques, there was a lot of militarized incidences of violence everywhere. And here you see my father, he was a guide at the Castillo San Felipe del Morro, and you see these were the kind of the implements of, aggression that was part and parcel of growing up in the Caribbean. And when I would get upset, I would run outside on the farm where we lived in Bayamón, and there was a eucalyptus tree. And I would spend hours peeling the bark of a eucalyptus tree and marveling at the layers of colors and the textures. And then I would come back a day or two later, and I would see that the tree had healed itself. The colors of the layers that I had peeled had grown back. And so through this process, I learned a very important lesson from nature, and it's that the natural world provides the power of regeneration, transformation, rebirth, which is the conceptual foundation of all of my work. And I apply it to my life and also to my art practice. And my early paintings from the 1990s embody this earthly connection. Here's a painting from 1996 titled El Yunque, almost 30 years ago, which is the rainforest in Puerto Rico. And you can see this earthly, rocky, mountainous form rising from a verdant background, manifesting the first appearance of the monolith form in my practice. Then in the early 2000s, I continued painting with knives on wood, slicing the paint a little bit more aggressively, creating sort of a geological stratifications. And you can see the beginning of my organic forms kind of pulsating out of these paintings. And I've also been very influenced by the energy of Los Angeles, this constant sense of movement and transformation that the city offers. You know, there's this energy that you draw from. And Los Angeles also, being the cradle of modern space-age technologies, is where I discovered the use of 21st materials such as carbon fiber and optical acrylics that I use in my practice today. And I've been obviously very influenced by minimalism and light and space and the focus on transcending the material to create a perceptual experience. I was really good friends with Dwayne Valentine for a long time until he passed away. He was definitely a friend and a mentor, and he was funny. I loved him because he was really funny and you know, was just an amazing human being, you know. But however, as a Latin woman from Puerto Rico, I developed my own language of what I call organicism, organic minimalism, connecting back the energy of the earth and centering ecological consciousness. And I take an ecofeminist approach because I explore the interconnection between colonial histories, ecological consciousness, and the universal forces of nature. In 2012, I created my first organic pod sculptures, and they embody these organic geometries. They speak a language of biology, cells, organic creatures, and they're mutable objects. And on the third floor, we have one of these sculptures, and you can see how the color shifts as you move around it because it contains what I call structural color, and structural color is present in nature. When you look at the back of a scarab beetle, or you look at an nacreous abalone shell, what you're really seeing is the light hitting a certain structural surface, refracting the light into the colors that you perceive in your eyes. So it's color based on light, not on applied paint. So none of my pod sculptures contain any sort of paint applied to the surface. It's pure light refracting into the constituent parts of the color spectrum. And I've also been influenced by the desert. Here's a photo from 1991 when I'd first come from Puerto Rico, and I drove all the way down to South Palm Springs, went to the bottom of the Indian Canyons, and I got out of the car and I had like an out-of-body experience because I could feel like this vortex of energy coming up from this part of the earth. And I was fascinated, and I vowed that someday I would set roots in this amazing place, and now that dream is coming true. And I'm almost done with the construction of a studio, my second studio here, so I'm very excited to now be part of the desert community. And in the desert, the sky has an incredible presence. You can feel geological time in a real sense. And what, for me, this generates an awareness of human time because you sense your own mortality. You know, when you're in this kind of environment, it just makes you feel alive. You realize that you have a limited amount of time and you have to really take advantage of it. And there have been many great artists that have lived or moved to the desert. Agnes Martin, George O'Keeffe, Agnes Pelton, John McCracken, Ken Price, Larry Bell. So many artists have moved to the West seeking to tap into that energy of the sublime that this part of the earth provides. Then in the late 2000s, I went on a sort of a pilgrimage around the West to experience some of the great land art installations of the West. Michael Heiser, Robert Smithson, Nancy Holt, Donald Judge Shinati. These experiences further influenced my thinking to seek connections to the earth in my practice. And in 2016, I developed my first monolith. Here you see the very first 12-foot silver projectile monolith, which is now in LACMA's collection. And it's created out of carbon fiber. And carbon is the most prevalent element on Earth, and it's sustainable as it can become part of the Earth again. So with these sculptures, I essentially subvert the meaning of form and materials. So I take carbon fiber, which is normally associated with military functions, the aerodynamic geometries of surveillance and war, the bullet, the projectile, the rocket, and I subvert its meaning by transmuting it into an object that's artistic with a purpose of transcendence. The monolith form represents bullets transformed into mountains, which is what Lala was saying, a mountainous form that transforms my personal experiences of gun violence into the strength of a mountainous form. And in Puerto Rico, there were amazing mountains. You see here on the right, El Yunque rainforest, which is shaped like an anvil, La Cordillera Central. There's all these mountain ranges. And as a child growing up, I would pull that energy from the mountainous form and identify with it just as a psychological coping mechanism, you know? So in a sense, these vessels, these monoliths are vessels of transformation. Violence, oppression, and death become transformed into healing, light, and life. And the monolithic form is also an endemic form in human history. For millennia, humans have gravitated to singular primal forms as conduits of invisible mystical forces. We love to believe in magic. And so, like, if you think about it, look at on the right top corner, you see amulets. For thousands of years, humans have loved to hold on to an amulet, put it in their pocket, because why? They feel protected, that it has some invisible energy. The pyramids of Giza, Egyptian obelisk, Stonehenge, and even my own indigenous Taino rune stones here. They're all evidence of the monolith's attraction to humans and the need for transcendence. And my sculptures also speak a universal language of geometries in motion. Here is where the personal becomes universal. Einstein's theory of relativity and space-time theory essentially posits that space and time are intertwined in an infinite fabric and warped by the forces of gravity. So if you look around you, you will see that there are no straight lines in nature. Everything is curved. That's the foundation of my practice. The awareness of these physical laws of the universe, which is why I make sculptures that are always kind of curved and in motion, because they're following what exists in the natural world. And I employ this language of universal geometries, and they're present not only microscopically, but also macrocosmically, starting with the basic building block of matter, the atom. So atomic particles harness energy and power in motion following elliptical orbits. There's no straight lines there. Cells inside our bodies present fluid organic curvatures containing life force. Our own human DNA presents torquing forms spiraling inside us. This is pure fluid geometry and motion is what we're made out of. The mathematical golden ratio, or the Fibonacci sequence, manifests in predictable curvatures in nature all around us. You see these forms expanding, moving, replicating outwards, creating organic geometric orders in countless life forms like broccoli, artichokes, pine cones, shells, centipedes, sunflowers, and even storms follow this pattern of the golden ratio. Macrocosmically, we see universal geometries are everywhere in outer space. Our own solar system embodies elliptical forces in motion, as seen in the pathways of the planets, Saturn's rings, etc. Galaxies and cosmic bodies observe asymmetrical, elliptical, spiraling forms and movement. We are all connected through invisible universal energy and motion. And this scientific reality undergirds all of my practice. My monoliths contain cosmic matter such as ionic waves and intergalactic particles. That's the universal. But they contain dirt and earth harvested from geographic locations of my life, like Arecibo, Puerto Rico, the birthplace of my father and my ancestors. That's the personal. And in 2021, I started creating these self-portraits or autorretratos, which are these totemic structures, estructuras totémicas, where A projectile monolith sits on top of layers of dirt and other matter harvested from different sites of my life. So for example, here you see the very bottom layer is pulverized bullets representing the violence I experienced. Then the red earth layer is the red earth of Puerto Rico. Then the lighter layer of sand represents California desert and the immigrant experience. And then the final layer is cosmic matter representing the future. And the monolith on top, in this case, has chlorophyll from the plants in Puerto Rico, which gives it this green color. So you have these kind of a picture of who I see myself as, with layers and layers of experiences. And today I'm kind of that green pointy thing on top. And then in my land and environmental installations around the world, I strive to connect not just to the earth in a traditional land art format. Usually men, would scarify the earth, they'd carve holes in the earth, but in my view, an ecologically conscious land art practice basically doesn't harm the earth, and rather maybe you make an object that goes on top of it, but it also very importantly relates to the true anthropological and ethnographic conditions of a site. So it's not just going out in the wilderness where nobody's around, but rather creating a project that interacts with the history of the site, the culture of the site, even ancestral knowledge of the site. And I've done installations at 3 different UNESCO World Heritage sites, so it's fascinating to go there because you're dealing with the human history, not just the vacant land or land out of nowhere. And this particular project was titled "The Future is Now," and this was for Desert X Al Ula 2020, and it addressed Saudi Arabia's 2030 vision of opening up its society, diversifying its economy, and looking to the future. That's why I created this transformative pigment that would refract with the light, kind of signifying this real intense transformation. And then in 2021, at the UNESCO World Heritage Site of the Pyramids, I created an earthwork which was a 30-foot elliptical gold dome, which referenced ancient Egyptians' contributions to the field of astronomy, science, art, architecture, mythology, and sacred geometries. So the gold color references the mythical god of the sun, God Ra, which was so key for them because the flooding, they had to always study the stars and the planets because the flooding of the Nile was determined by these celestial movements, and they depended on it for their food because the flooding of the Nile would basically allow them to plant their crops. And also this curvature was inspired by the Sphinx, the head of the Sphinx, and the sacred geometries of the third eye, which they believed in. In 2021, for free sculpture, I installed a quantum shift at Regent's Park in London, which marked a post-COVID shift in planetary energy, or what I call the post-Anthropocene, which is that humans were no longer in control. Then in 2022, I created an environmental installation in the Netherlands forest, and this was for a land art exhibition titled Godheads, Idols in Times of Crisis, responding to the war in Ukraine and other global calamities post-COVID. And then in 2022, in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, we installed 1,000 galaxies of light starfield, and this was inspired by the Arecibo message from the telescope in Puerto Rico. In 1974, scientists from NASA beamed into space a powerful interstellar message carrying basic information about humanity and the Earth way into outer space in the hopes that maybe sentient beings would contact us. And this installation encompassed a 2-mile stretch of the Wadi Hanifa Lake, which is Riyadh's only waterway. And tonight we have with us Darius. Darius, will you stand up? Please, let's give a hand to Darius, because Darius is an amazing electric engineer, and he spent over a month here in Riyadh wiring this stuff in the sand, so it was incredible. Thank you, Darius. And from above, it looked like a constellation and the dots and lines of the Arecibo message that was beamed into space. And then in 2023, I activated another ancient a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is the Citadel in Old Cairo. And the Citadel is a medieval Islamic era walled city from the 12th century. And this was the first time contemporary art was allowed inside the gates of the city. So it's pretty incredible. And I mined white granite blocks from the Valley of the Kings near Aswan in Lower Egypt. And basically it represented the rudimentary block of how civilization was built, because all walls and everything comes from the rectangle and that stratification of blocks. And earlier this year, in 2024, I installed an urban environmental activation in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, and at the Museo Nacional de la República, designed by Oscar Niemeyer. And Brasilia was created in the late 1950s, ex nihilo, which means out of nothing, by then Brazilian President Juscelino Kubitschek and urban planner Lucio Costa and Oscar Niemeyer, which arguably is the most famous modernist architect of Latin America. And this monumental axis that you see was designed so that it was like the perfect utopian city. So all the government buildings go in one direction and all the residential buildings go in the other. And from up above, from space, it looks like an airplane. So the whole city was designed. It's the most incredible city. So very exciting to have a sculpture there. And the sculpture responded to Niemeyer's architecture as well as the environment. And the pigment that I developed basically was very much, looking to integrate the clouds, the movement, the light. And Oscar Niemeyer had designed 3 giant 50-foot pools of water that se llaman espejos de agua, which are mirrors of water that would pull down the sky, because he loved integrating nature into his practice. And the title of this piece was Plasmático, el cuarto estado de materia, and it spoke to the plasmatic condition of the Latin American experiences with colonialism. And plasma is the 4th state of matter, because you have, solid, liquid, gas, but plasma is created all over the universe under extreme pressure. And so it's kind of a metaphor of the Latin experience. Inside the museum, I had a survey exhibition presenting multiple monoliths and organic sculptures that activated the dome architecture. And the installation acted as a time travel experience addressing ecological and universal concerns. And most recently and currently on view in Sao Paulo, Brazil, at the Instituto Archium de Cultura, created an environmental activation at a 100-year-old colonial structure. And in this intriguing architectural context, I activated this layered history of Sao Paulo's colonial heritage. And this museum has a very robust educational program and hundreds of school children and others constantly visiting, and it was a very rewarding experience to see everybody's reactions and feedback. And just to wrap up, one of my very first memories was the moon landing in 1969, where it seared into my brain something scientists have called the overview effect. So after the moon landing, these images started coming out of the Earth from far away, and nobody had ever seen the Earth like that. And this overview effect causes you to have this realization of how fragile the Earth is. And it comes coupled with a state of kind of awe and self-transcendence. So this kind of seared into my brain for many years and has influenced me. And for many decades, as I've traveled around the world, I've photographed the Earth from above. And this practice reinforces my belief that life on Earth is really a miracle, and that what unites us, humans, is much more than what divides us. And we are all connected through the quantum universe back to the beginning of time. Thank you very much.
A la enfermera y los doctores, a Puerto Rico huracanes y temblores. Yo tengo fe de que vendrán días mejores.
Thank you so much, Gisela. And I'd like to bring back Mark to the stage. And we'll open it up for a Q&A. So you are allowed to ask questions of either speaker or both. You're not required to make a connection between the subjects, but this is very much encouraged. And anytime we have a crossover question, you'll hear this sound. Okay, so open it up.
this way.
Nancy's making her way to the middle for our first connection.
So I would like have my question to be in the form of a little bit of a role play. I want you to imagine that I am an advanced placement 12th grader who excels in both art and in science. And that you both are my art teachers and my science teachers. And I'm trying to determine whether or not I want to pursue a college path, either in conservation or in pure art. And I'm asking you a question as my art teachers. What are the principles of chemistry and light that I need to really inhabit and really have competencies in to excel either in conservation or in art?
You want to go first?
Just so I understand the question, it was what? Can you repeat the last part? Chemistry or what was the? Oh, okay. Well, God, I mean, you know what? For me, what's great about art is you can pull from all these realms, science, history, geology, geography, whatever you want, and it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. Do you know what I mean? You can say, well, I'm going to put some cosmic radiation dust in my piece because I say so, So that's great. That's what's great about art. You can tap into these fields and learn, but you can do things metaphorically. You can do things that are not necessarily bound by, like, for example, as he has to be extremely scientific, I'm sure, in what he does. Whereas I don't know, the artists have a little bit more freedom is what I would tell you to pull from all different areas,
I guess I would tell you to follow your heart in both directions. I think if you listen to both of us talk, we're both interested in materials. I come to it from a slightly different perspective, but I'm passionate about materials and materials that artists use, and artists use those materials to express their inner being, which
Right.
Gisela does to perfection. But you can do both. I sort of figured out a way to combine those two things in the field of restoration, where I took my love of art and my love of science and made them work together in a very happy marriage.
Also, I think what wait, what?
Thank you for that.
Okay. No, I was going to say that what he does actually is kind of creative in a way. I was just thinking about it because to have to take apart a painting and figure out a new way of assembling it and new ways of tackling repainting it or materials, actually there's a part of art in there too. It's not just science. So it just dawned on me that we're way more interrelated than.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Lala, you have a question over here on your left.
For Gisela, I want to know, where do you have these structures built and how involved are you in watching or participating? I mean, they're giant, right? Mm-hmm. So do you have, I don't know, warehouses?
I actually have 3 different fabricators. I have my studio with assistants in Duarte, and I make my pods there. And then the really large pieces, I work with an aerospace fabricator in Santa Ana in Orange County.
Oh, wow.
And I go there all the time because step by step, I make sure that everything is turning out the way I like it. So, and they take a long time. It's like 1.5 to 2 years to make one of them because, first you have to make a giant mold, and then you have to layer the carbon fiber in a cross-hatching, transversal way where you have many, many different. Carbon fiber is amazing. It's like a fabric. It comes in.
That's what I don't know.
It comes in a giant roll, and it's this silky. Talking about weaving canvases, like he was talking about the way the canvases are woven.
The warp and the weft.
The warp and the weft. So the carbon fiber is woven in this silky fabric giant roll, and you pull it, and it's so beautiful. I go, oh, someday I'll make a dress out of it, And then what you do is you layer it in these giant molds that look like almost like skating rinks or what do they call that? Skateboarding It's like those skateboarding parks, that's what it looks like.
Right.
And giant, and then you put many layers of it in completely different directions transversally to get the strength. So it becomes thin, but it's very strong, which is why they use it in aerospace, because it's light, it doesn't weigh a lot.
So the structures are not real heavy.
The actual carbon fiber, what you see, is not that heavy.
Oh, wow.
But then to keep it down, I build a structure inside of it that is made out of steel, and it has these wood ribs, and then that holds all the carbon fiber together.
Or it would blow away.
Right, it would be too light. So it has like a rib cage, so
Wow.
to speak.
Well,
And,
this is
yeah.
just amazing. I am
Thank
so
you.
excited that I came
Yeah.
tonight. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and then my other monoliths, I make them. I have another fabricator in downtown LA, and I cast those with urethane, and I mix my own powders. Like I make all these like dichroic powders, and then I put them into the thing like a witch's brew with a stick, and I mix it in a cauldron, and then that gets cast, and then that becomes the little bit more, the monoliths that are like 8 feet tall, that are a little bit more domestic in
So
scale.
are you making little ones in the beginning?
No, well,
to
little, I
test
mean
it?
8 feet tall versus
Yeah.
25 feet.
Right,
So not that little, but
But you're not making models first.
No, I never have worked out of models.
Interesting.
I just do
Well,
stuff.
Thank you, thank you.
If I could just leap in and
Yeah.
try and find the connection there.
Yeah.
Because the word fabricator is very important.
Yeah.
And as an old master paintings restorer, my job was to figure out who the fabricators were that these artists worked with. I mean, the
Yeah.
Monet is an example of that, where we know that he didn't stretch his own canvases, he went to his fabricator.
Right.
You hopefully are leaving a record of the fabricators that you work with.
Yes,
And the
yeah.
materials that you have.
Yes.
So that 200 years from now, we won't have to demystify all of that work,
Yeah.
because we'll know what it is because you recorded it.
I try to, yeah.
Good.
Christmas gifts for everyone. We have another question over here.
Hi. I'm just wondering more about your Palm Springs studio plans.
Where?
Oh, sorry,
I
I'm
can't
right
see.
here.
Oh, right
Yep,
there.
Yeah,
Well, it's under construction right now, and it's about 5 minutes from here. I'm very excited.
yeah.
Like where when you come into town, where the tramway, you're going up to the tramway. Well, in that same light, you turn left instead of right, and there's a
Right.
little like section there that's like a nice industrial pocket there. So I'm building there, and it'll be ready probably by January.
And are you going to be working on the same type of stuff, or are you going in a
I
different
think,
direction?
I think it's whatever flows. I don't like having a predetermined thing, but I
Yeah.
think the space will speak to me, and I'll probably, I'll keep my studio in LA, but this will be like a special place because of the desert's energy. So I don't know what I'll do, but I'm sure it'll be like a creative boost from being out here.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
Thank you.
Question over here.
Thank you. Yeah, this is great. My question was to see how the two of you might speak about a common theme, which is the relationship between truth and magic, or truth and the work of layering, right? In the first case, in the scientific case, you have to dig through, right, through various with a lot of scientific support to get to what we think is the original. And in the second case, Gisela is adding and adding and adding to materials to sort of go past the idea of truth through these. Anyway, it's about layering. I would like you to talk about that.
I actually think about truth and works of art in terms of inevitability. The reason great works of art are great is because they can only be what they are, and they work that way. And that takes a lot of effort. All of those layers have to build up until you get to the point where it's inevitable. This is the finished product. This is what I was striving to create. This is what I was striving to say. And that's what I uncover in the works of art that I have worked on, and it's what I do in my own work as well, in trying to get it to that point where when you look at it, well, it really couldn't be any other way. And the pathway to that leads you to that inevitable truth in the work.
Okay, here's an overlap. Where's the sound? I'm liking that sound. What you just said is so true, because my whole life has been so many layers of different things that have happened. Our experiences are one layer on top of the other, and then put that into the work of art, and it becomes your truth as an artist, as a human, because we really are stratified, and all of us, whether we're artists or not, we live these lives that are like sedimentary. Like if you study the geological layers of the earth, building experiences upon experiences, and of joy, of trauma, of suffering, whatever it is, that makes us whole, and then that becomes our truth. And I love that metaphor of the earth. Like we are also part of the earth. You know, if you think about our DNA, is stratified because we're carrying stuff inside us that I really believe you can trace back to the beginning of the universe, you know, all throughout the eons, because we are just matter that has become reconstituted. So our atoms were in the Big Bang at some point, you know, and we brought it down in layers to today. So it has a lot of truth and meaning, you know.
All right, and we've got another question over here.
For Mark. Oh, hi. Thank you so much. I have a question for Mark. Both of you, really. I noticed in the paint, when you did the x-rays, that you have that stratification, and there's like an amalgam that's occurring in those images of the paint that you don't see with the naked eye, but it looks like a granite. You know, it's that composition that looks like an amalgam of color. And that's quite interesting to see that paint actually is all paint. Like those are older paints, but in contemporary paints, do you have that same sort of, like I said, an amalgam of these different colors of pieces within the paint structure?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the you know, paint is basically colored mud, and it's ground up rocks, ground up stones, ground up synthetic pigments. But when you get it up to that microscopic level, it does have that geological presence, that stratification,
Yeah.
and it blends to the normal eye, and we see it all coming together and having some meaning. But when you take it apart and dive into it, it's all these individual pieces that somehow fuse together to make what we eventually see on the surface.
And beyond paint, like everything I do is also layered. So it doesn't have to be just paint. As an artist, you can layer all kinds of materials, which is what I do in my pods, you know, optical materials, acrylics, different things that get formed in the oven and then layered, and there's air in between each layer. So someday, I don't know, some other conservator will have his hands full many years, 100 years from now to figure it out.
Do those other materials have those same amalgams in them if you were to look at them microscopically, or are they more?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, if you take a piece from a medieval bronze, for example, and stick it under a scanning electron microscope, it's a myriad amalgam of substances and surfaces and textures all fused together, and the naked eye sees it as a single thing. But on a microscopic level, once again, it's all of the atoms holding together in different ways.
I think that deserves a connection song.
Yay.
All right.
And we have another question up front.
Okay, this is kind of a two-part question. I want to know what soundtrack you guys listen to as you do your work. Mark, you as a conservator and a painter, and Gisela, when you're doing your work.
As a painter's restorer, I always listen to classical music because it needed to be calm. and you know, you sit there for 4 or 5 hours looking at the same painting. It's a very Zen experience. When I go into my own studio today, I listen to everything from the Metropolitan Opera to country western to Bad Bunny.
Yeah. You know, when I'm really in the creative process, I don't listen to anything because I need absolute silence. But then once I'm working on something that becomes not the real creative side, where it's like more of a menial, you know, I'm building or I'm doing something with my hands, then I have all kinds of, you know, jazz, Bad Bunny, you know, a mixture of everything. Yay. Sure.
All right, and we have one more.
So what I got from both of your presentations is that light seems to be the giver and the taker of art. How does that affect your process, knowing that, light could bring a beautiful piece, but also light could take from that piece over time?
Such a smart question, Edgar. Really, really. Yeah. Well, I think that, using light as material is incredible. To be able to say, I'm using the source of life. And I don't know how it'll function many years from now, 100 years from now. Like, my work is based on light. So, like, I hope it holds up after many, many years of having the light bouncing around in there, But it's 21st century material, so we don't know. I think they're pretty inert. Maybe I could have a conversation with you later about what it.
Well, I mean, light is the basis of all art, I think, and we try to capture light in creating a work of art, and we try and understand the light when we look at someone else's work of art. It's really what infuses it with meaning, and so as a restorer and as an artist, it's constantly there. It's the foundation of everything that you're looking at, because the quality of the light, the character of the light, the way the light illuminates the work of art itself, the way the work of art was created under a certain light source, all of that affects the way the work looks, and all of that affects the meaning. I mean, Gisela's work looks very different at dusk and sunrise than during the nighttime or in full sunlight, and that's part of the beauty of the work, is that the light changes the appearance of the materials and also changes the meaning and changes what you can see when you're looking at that particular work. So it's the cradle of the work itself.
Okay, last chance. Anybody else have any connections or questions they would like to ask? I have one right here.
Two more. Right. I think she had a question too. He had a question.
I love a woman that comes to me.
LOL. Gisela, I have a question for you. A lot of your work is at these historic sites, and I'm very curious to learn, are they meant to be permanent?
No, because of the nature of a lot of these sites, like you can't, if they're UNESCO World Heritage sites, you can't just have it permanently, It's like the privilege of having an art show there is special, so there's a limited time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Time for one more.
Hi. So it's interesting that you're both makers and you're both collectors of things from the earth that you incorporate into your sculpture. And I wonder what inspires you when you're out in the world, and what you have in your personal collections at home, like what you surround yourself with that you like to have and find and shop for, acquire, discover.
Wow, well, what inspires me is life, this amazing energy that we have on the planet. And sometimes I just look around and I say, God, everything is just so incredible. The air, the clouds, the mountains, like we just take it for granted. And that's what I was talking about when you say the overview effect. And the very first time that one of the astronauts went above the atmosphere, this is before they landed on the moon, and he saw the atmosphere, how thin it was. So like everything around me, life inspires me. And what do I collect? I mean, I collect other artists' work from light and space movement, minimalism, other artists that inspire me. Like I have, pieces from Dwayne and from Larry Bell, and artists that have been my friends or acquaintances or just other people that inspire me. I like living with their work too, because you always see something new and different. And that's what I love about a work of art, because at a certain point, the artist will not be with you anymore, but that object exists and can communicate different things hundreds of years from now. Like maybe the meaning changes or our perception of the object changes, but living with that energy, because it's sort of like the artist puts the energy into the work, and then they leave a little piece of that energy behind, and you can commune with it without them, being there. So like I like my work, I always say it's like little bits of life that carry that energy of life, and when I'm long gone, it'll still have that energy that hopefully it will transmit to the humans of that time, many years from now?
Yeah, I when I was younger and I was working on old master paintings, I collected contemporary art, and because it was so different than what I was working on every single day. I'd say my collecting process and likes and dislikes are evolving because I'm really shedding a lot of the stuff that I collected before, and if I'm collecting anything now, it's experiences. Because I'm at a stage in life where I need to have that more than I need to have the stuff that I carried with me for all those years. And I make my own stuff, so I try and get rid of that too.
We are all accepting Christmas gifts, please. Okay, back to you, Sharissa. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And to wrap it up, we are going to, let's give a big round of applause for our MC, Stevie Crooks, who will tie it all together and share his thoughts and connections through poetry.
Hello, everybody. How you guys doing? Haven't been here in a long time. Anybody's first time? Oh. Anybody know who I am? All right, cool. I just want to say thank you guys for coming. This is great. I see a lot of new faces. I see a lot of old faces. And, oh, hello. Can we turn this light off? And maybe just, yeah, that's better. There we go. Okay. All right. So I was in the back. For those who don't know who I am, I do poetry, and while the speakers are speaking, I'm back there listening the whole time, and I'm trying to create something that ties everything together on the spot. So let's see what I got. All right. One preserves the echoes, the fragments of the past. The other bursts visions meant to outlast. Conservation seeks to capture the fade, while her art is a burst, an escapade. One mends the fractures that history makes. The other invents, remolds, and reshapes. In the hands of science, the past is reborn. But in the artist's grasp, the future is sworn. The conservator is a keeper of flame, ensuring each spark remains the same. But the artist, the dreamer, they break all constraints, sculpting the light where shadows grow faint. A cosmic dance. The sculptures hum with notes made by hands. Not quite of this earth, nor wholly divine. The pathway to truth can only be found in our experience in our mind. Romance with the sun, flirting with each ray, turning plastic to prism, bullets in ballet. Shapes that shimmer, pulse and unfold. Shadows tell stories and colors untold. This art, an echo of galaxies far, preserving the beauty of nature in a singular star. But it's not just science, it's artful deceit. A tango with reality, a trick to repeat. Balancing the raw feelings of creating in the fight to last. A brush with the future that honors the past. So here's to the keepers of the form and design, preserving the glow that continues to shine. For in every reflection and in every glass hue lives a testament of the old made new. The work stands timeless, refined, in the hands of those who honor the mind. A blend of science, the art. Oh, I stopped right there. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. My name is Stevie.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much to our speakers, Mark Leonard and Gisela Colón, DJ and rapper Stevie Crooks, our DJ C Love and our rapper Stevie Crooks, and to all the Palm Springs Art Museum staff and volunteers who make this event possible. Please join us at the museum every Thursday night for night sessions hosted by DJ AA and Little Lives. And our next Mixed Feelings will be a week from now on November 14th here in the Annenberg Theater. Become a member and get exclusive access to discounts and events. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.